Good morning. Please take a seat. Good morning, everyone. Please take a seat. Good morning, everyone. Before we start our meeting, good morning, everyone. Please take a seat. Before we ask Diane to introduce our speaker, we would like Gretchen Witchy and Lisa von Stukenagel, our hospitality team, to join us up front.
Oh, all the way up. Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm here to let you all know that we'll still be holding our annual holiday tea this year. We're going to have it outdoors at the Museum of Darien, and the format is going to be a tailgate party. Refreshments will be served. And if you probably saw on your way in that there was a car outside decorated, holiday themed. And we hope that that would inspire you to sign up, either host a car or just join another group that's has a car and decorate. There's space for approximately 12 cars. And I'm going to pass around this sign up sheet. As I said, feel free to sign up as a group or just join a group. This is not a competition. There's no judging. It's just supposed to be fun. We put this together in brought bins of Christmas things. In an hour, you can do it and just bring it by, and it should just be a fun way to continue our holiday party. So I'll pass this around.
Please sign up. There's no pressure. It's not a competition.
Why is it a competition?
All right, so that will be passed around during the meeting. Diane, you want to
do the shout out to our judge?
Yeah,
Oh, they're not ready.
and next we have Diane to introduce our speaker.
Hi, everybody. I feel like I could spend a whole hour just introducing that. I heard about Matt as being a phenomenal town hall speaker. So among other things, we have that part to look forward to. And I think it's a really great, unique topic in that he's, I would, after having read up about him, I would refer to him as an extreme horticulturist, a plant geek, which he's called himself, and an expert on like rare and unusual varieties of plants and vegetables. He does have a book for sale in the back that happens to be one of several that he has, and it's on vegetables. But he's one of these horticulturists who gets down dirty and no fuss, no muss. It's all about the real thing. He did at age 9 wander into Horticultural Hall, and after a weekly piano lesson in Boston, he decided he too could grow marigolds and exhibit them. So at age 10, he was already exhibiting. He's lives in Worcester, Mass, and interestingly enough, he was born and raised in this same house where he lives now, where his dad was born, and has a greenhouse, a big garden. He travels a lot. He until recently was working at Hasbro, as in toys, as a creative director, and traveled a lot with Hasbro. And at this point, his travels are inspired by his gardening and plants and research. He also is, among many other leadership positions within gardens and garden associations, is the founder of the New England Dahlia Society, which a lot of us know. And oh boy, North American Rock Garden Society, Scottish Rock Garden Club, Alpine Garden Society, very, very involved. And I think I will leave it at that. I know he's very, very curious, quite the collector, quite the optimist, loves to cook. And as I said, I could keep going, but now, your turn.
I always run late. I'm gonna set the clock, but jump up and yell if I forget. Hi, everyone. First of all, do you mind if I take my mask off? Or not? I am a little vaxxed. Just like my booster yesterday, so if I pass out, you know. Okay. So this talk, it's interesting because I created this talk, I don't know, 5 years ago for our garden club, and it's suddenly become like my most popular talk, especially this year. I think people want to lose themselves and escape in social situations in the holidays. And you know, of course, the holidays are all combined here. This is Christmas, but this is including Hanukkah. Not that there are a lot of decorations with Hanukkah, but even if you're a pagan, there's a lot of plant material, especially if you're pagan, it's a lot of plant material. So it's, okay, that's better, a little tall. At Hasbro, I mean, I was at Hasbro for 30 years, so you can blame me for My Little Pony and Transformers. Seriously, My Little Pony, that's the other quote that my pictures in. But what it did teach me is that people love pretty. I think we're wired that way. We love sparkle, we love glitter, we love decorating, we love style, design, fashion, art, and all that. So it all comes together in my plants. And if you ever been to my blog, Growing with Plants, you'll see my books. I love design too, so it factors in with that. But this presentation really fed into the last 10 years of Hasbro with what I did there, which was a futurist. I was in a high concepts group. I spent most of my time researching. They always say Matt goes down the rabbit hole. You know, I want to know why. Why are little girls in Japan liking this particular doll? Is it something their mothers had, their grandmothers had? So I apply that same thing with plants, and that's what led to this. And I think a lot of this we know, and a lot of it's legend or urban legend, or a lot of it's misinformation. And I also made some really interesting discoveries, which when I tell my friends about, they never seem to care, their eyes closed. Over about we plant people are totally hardwired for this. So the holidays, and let's say Christmas, is very nostalgic, right? That's the first thing we sort of connect to, and everyone in here has a different connection and a different memory, what song they like and what decorating style they are. Whether it's year round, what your favorite color is, what patterns you like, your friends may hate the color you have, may hate the dress you picked out, and you love it for some reason. And we have that especially with those most moving moments in our lives, which are usually based around family holidays. So we're all from different age groups. So for some people, like your deepest memory of Christmas might be the 1960s, or it might be the 70s. They are, some people in the 80s and 90s. I was listening to a radio show on the way in 2 days ago, talking about this guy, I don't know, he was a rapper in his like late 30s, talking about his favorite Christmas toy was this dancing Santa from a CVS, and he remembered the smell of it. And I was like, oh my God. It's always something for everyone, right? But a lot of us love the older nostalgia, right? I say pre-1950 when it comes to, especially with Christmas. You know, you remember when there was tinsel? And no, I did find a I should share it as a great company that I've always been saying this because I would go to China for Hasbro, and the same town in Shenzhen that makes all the toys, makes all the Christmas decorations. And I'll show some pictures of that, but I love old Christmas lights, like the black cords with, or green and red cords with the black socket with a flame-shaped opaque glass ceramic bulb. And there's a young designer from Target, he left Target, but he started his own company making LED versions of this last year, and he sold out. And he just launched again last week and sold out again. It's on Instagram, but I ordered like 10 sets of them. I said, this is exactly what I'm looking for. So other people see it, even the packaging is the same. But Christmas is not just, what I'm saying Christmas, but let's say holiday season, sort of grown around the world, right? This is Egypt, and it's different everywhere. This is, you know, 10% Christian population in Egypt, or in Colombia, or in Brazil. And in China, you see this too. You see LED lights everywhere. You can go to far western China. I was in Yunnan last year, and the cities, you know, our cities look like New York City, and every building is covered in LED lights. So even the buses in Brazil are. But here's in Europe, outside of Shenzhen, you can see these factories, and it's just horrifying conditions, of course, right? You're spraying red glitter on reindeer for like 8 weeks in the heat. But almost all of our holiday decorations we find at Michael's, Target, and Walmart, and Mass Market all come from here. I mean, I always wonder, what do these people think? Like, we're not really celebrating Christmas there. I'm sure they're making pumpkins and really crazy Halloween decorations too, but it is a big business. It's a global business. These go all over the world. And when you see it in the factories, it really changes your perspective on what we choose to decorate. Yet this is what most people, you get the Grandin catalog, you know, like, I'm going to do my front doorway with, you know, I'm not going to use real noble fir. I'm going to use, you know, whatever's in style that year. Certainly it's not this. But a lot of us are really inspired by sort of the 1990s. You know, I think we could probably blame or credit Martha, right, for elevating our taste levels in the 90s for what Christmas could be, or at least her teams. You know, different color palettes, open alpine shaped trees. Yeah, for some of us, like I was raised in really a rural part just outside of Worcester, where we would pick our own trees still every year. And you know, it's a 17-foot tree, and it always had to have 2 feet of space between all the branches so we could hang big ornaments. For a tree that size, you have to have big ornaments. So these sort of Christmas tree, farm trees you find now that have been trimmed 4 or 5 times a year until they're basically hedges or bushes that you put in your house. Have really changed even how they make Christmas decorations in China. So they're making bushy artificial trees that you can't hang decorations on. So really, I think we look for that old-fashioned feel. And there is a sort of universal old-fashioned feel, and that's when you look way back at the holidays, when you're looking back to the Victorian era and earlier. And one of the best places to look for that are greeting cards. In Worcester, Worcester's Historical Society has the largest collection of Valentine's Day cards. They say it started in Worcester, and at Hasbro, we own the Bradley Company, which was a lithographer in the early 1800s. And they started making holiday cards and cards of birthdays, holidays, all like from 1830 on. So to go through those archives and find all sorts of strange expressions at a time when it's just starting to use color, right? Just starting to use typography and have fun and humor. It wasn't always religious. And then we start to see how designers today, or let's say even feature films like Harry Potter, you can really create a very charming Christmas moment that feels universal. Or at Universal, because this is Harry Potter World, Wizarding World at Universal, which has an amazing light show. Just go to YouTube, you'll see it. It's fantastic. A little over the top. But historical references to Christmas, I really lost myself in, right? So this is a Civil War era Harper's Weekly, and you can see Santa sitting on a sleigh, and you see all sorts of native plants, natural plants that are used. Of course, this was a time when there were still greenhouses that were just coming into trade, but there were no poinsettias yet. It was still holly, ivy, berry branches from the woods. And that is sort of the core Christmas old-fashioned look, right? I'm a member of the Horticulture Club of Boston, which is sort of a private 50-member club that's almost 300 years old now. And our meeting is tomorrow, and I was looking as an archivist, I'm looking through their records, and I found, oh gosh, I don't know, from I think 1896 onwards, every year they had a discussion about collecting greens from the woods and how do we stop cities like Lowell, Massachusetts from harvesting all the mountain laurel. So this was an issue even way back then. They were really realizing that not everything is sustainable. So today we still see some towns use mountain laurel. I grew up picking mountain laurel, making laurel grounds for the house. But it's, I think a lot of us have to be conscious of berry bowls and things that we might have grown up with. Is it sustainably grown or not? If it's from your own property, I think that's fine. But it's amazing that 150 years later, we're still talking about that. So there are cliche Christmas images, right? If you think of whether it's an artwork or film, on plates, on engravings, there's this romance to Christmas that I think a lot of us always want to add some in. So people say, that's amazing, I can't, where'd you get that? And you're like, well, we've been celebrating these sort of icons that always involve plants for at least 200 years. Here in New England, we're really lucky, because if I gave this talk in LA, they're like, oh, I show a picture of my greenhouse in most of my talks, and in Worcester, because we're in the North Atlantic snow belt, we can get 120 inches of snow a year, and the drifts are 10, 12 feet over the top. So this sort of thing, like the Great Blizzard in 1888, they go nuts over, or if they see this, they're like, oh, but we see this every day. We might live in this. We live in a calendar, right? It's just, whether it's autumn, spring, fall, or winter, we're really fortunate. So it's very close to that ideal Victorian Christmas feel or winter feel as we decorate. And we're really fortunate that we live here. There's not much we have to do. You can throw a red bow on, throw a tight bunch of greens from the woods, and be very authentic. The rest of the world, because you see those same images in China, the rest of the world doesn't have that. It really only exists here in New England. So the earliest Christmas cards are really early, let's say, they started printing in Worcester down through southern Connecticut in 1810, 1820, but it was Louis Prang who really decided to select certain holidays, right, and market them. So it's fun, and you can do this, you can go on Etsy or even eBay still and find images like this, which will give you great ideas on what did they do in 1865. And you can find some of the funny, crazy ones too. But it's the plant material, right? So here's a Christmas card, but you're showing what we may still be, it's warm out today. There's still probably some goldenrod blooming. There's still ferns in the woods. You naturally would have in 1810 picked these to bring into the home to make an arrangement for the table. We're not always limited to, we focus down and sterilize our holiday flowers to think, oh, it's a red carnation and it's and it's poinsettia, whereas really it was whatever was in bloom. Apple trees often would have bloomed early, like every 4 or 5 years, you'll get crab apples and apples that bloom in November, December. So that wasn't that unusual. Probably will happen this year. Winter berries in the woods, right? Bark, woods, those colors, there's a warmth. The natural plants of winter, when we start getting to things like mistletoe and holly, of course, and ivy, that does go back to Europe, to the Druids, and the very early celebrations of solstice in winter. So it could be something the Puritans maybe have thrown away for 20, 30 years, but came back again. But also a lot of the flowers that bloom in Europe are associated closely with Christmas. So you'll find primroses, and if you have a greenhouse, the geraniums are blooming really beautifully in December. Or azaleas, tender azaleas, indica azaleas. So these are often featured on Christmas cards because that's what they had in the first cold pit houses or glass houses right up until maybe 1900. Because many of the flowers we think of today and associated with Christmas still are tropical, weren't brought here yet. I like Dr. Johnson, and these cards you can order with anything you want on them. But early snowdrops too, let's say from Virginia south, there were a lot of bulbs coming into colonial America from all the shipping that was happening, and unfortunately probably the slave trade, because those ships made the same routes. But holly and mistletoe is probably the oldest, right? So the idea of bringing greens into a house, goes back to the Druids, goes back very early into the 10th century. And right up until the 16th century or 1700s in England, primarily is holly and ivy. And they're both rich with meaning. I mean, throughout the year, whether holly, represent evil, you could wear it so you won't be hit by lightning. It has amazing white bark. It had a lot of attributes. But you think of both are poisonous, both are toxic, but both are powerful meanings for many different groups of people. But there are different mistletoe varieties, right? There's American mistletoe, there's European mistletoe. The mistletoe in particular goes back the farthest, right? We can go back to the 9th century. You can go back to really early paganism. The wood of mistletoe would be something in Norse mythology, Balder was slain by a mistletoe spear, not very holiday-like. But for a good 150 years, marketing of mistletoe was the thing for winter season. So you'll find these everywhere in museums, paintings and etchings of mistletoe sellers in England and France, throughout Austria. So the icon of bringing in mistletoe. This is called the mistletoe seller. And mistletoe is a parasite. It grows on the branches of trees. And I find now I can buy it on eBay. I buy a 25-pound box. People are selling it. Virginia South is selling mistletoe. It's a great thing to get as a gift if you have a holiday party. And you can tie bows onto it because it's hard to find real mistletoe today. It's not going to self-seed here. It's not hardy here. But that's how it grows. It grows on trees and branches, but there is something charming about having it. Sometimes we keep it out on the porch until Christmas Eve, and then we bring it in and decorate the table with the roasted mistletoe and the white berries. Then this is the whole romantic part, right? You don't want to miss that part with mistletoe, because plastic mistletoe just isn't going to make someone love kiss you. But it was a really big thing in Victorian era. I mean, I think because it was an excuse and it seemed like a rule, right? Like, well, we're under the mistletoe. So it was often featured in etchings, and there were no films back then. So how do they, learn all this? It's handed down through writings, savvy posts, in greeting cards. And this is right up until World War I. So the romance of having a holiday party and having mistletoe. It's a really big deal. It's a really important part. Most of the mistletoe here in North America now is the European one that's been growing. And it doesn't grow like this. You have to tie it together in a bunch. It's very brittle. So if you do order it, keep it moist in the bag, then wire it together. And I would do that a day before you have your party, don't leave it out, it dries out very quickly. Because you don't want to go buy a plastic one, this one is fresh, but it looks very plastic. But it's gonna bring angst to your guests. And it's great inspiration for like Hallmark films. And I think, again, very much like the Puritans, the Hallmark films are like, oh, we're just sort of marginally safe with everything. This is probably the closest to sex they get. So there's this great one, The Mistletoe Secret, and in fact, there's probably like 35 films. That have the word mistletoe. I like menorah and mistletoe and menorah. It's really appreciated. Mistletoe movie star. They all look the same. It's like the same two actors. You know? But for the real powerful meaning, Holly and Ivy still is the sort of deepest. It's funny, we've lost all that with Holly and Ivy. I think we think of Ivy as a weed, right? Unless it blooms and then it's sort of precious. And Holly's always beautiful. But we see so much artificial holly, we don't want to mess with the prickles. But we've lost the meanings, right? The eternal life. This any green brought indoors. Imagine, you know, before radio, before television, before films, and you didn't travel. To bring greens in from the woods was a beautiful thing to do. So that's what you see. You see a lot of, you can almost tell regionally by looking at printed material where they came from. You can tell this is from England. It's what would be blooming then, early snowdrops and ivy. And then artists would take all those same visual tools and create all sorts of fantastic drawings of like a beautiful holly jumper. But it has its roots in the more darker side of paganism. I mean, I'm Lithuanian, so I know that Lithuanian celebrations are based on a lot of the pagan celebrations before Christianity. So if you just, like Wikipedia will explain like the meals we would have on Christmas Eve night originally was on the 22nd, when the animals would talk at midnight and all that. It just moved up. So, but there's a lot of crossover from pagan into Christianity and then into other religions. So most of us don't care about that. Santa. But that also relates back to Norse traditions, right? So all these holiday traditions have just become like a stew pot now, what you see at Michael's. I'm okay with that. It's, you know, it's 2021. But if we're looking for something different, because it's so hard to find something different and original to decorate your home with, it's the holidays, right? It's just more and more the same. I think in the 90s, again, when Martha was really pitching sort of, you know, don't go with acetate red ribbon, why not get a beautiful sage velvet ribbon? And we just elevated design to a place where it was beautiful, but you just can't do new beautiful every year. It starts to repeat itself. That's why I started looking back at older traditions, like what's happening in Sweden, what's happening in Norway, even what the Druids were doing. Last year we had a big studio room like this where I just hung big Swedish wreaths with battery-powered candles on them, and then hung mistletoe and Spanish moss. You know, we didn't have to buy any satin ribbons or buy any tinsel. The 12 Days of Tudor, which you have on Netflix now, is a great. Not that you're going to do a boar's head like this, but it really helps you understand how important these winter holidays were during the Tudor period. I mean, right after the Tudor period, of course, no, because I think the Puritans ruined it for what, 30, 40 years. But after that, it came back again. So a lot of that old English look is still relevant today for what we do. So the use of natural plant materials, oranges, citrus, cloves. In the Tudor time, they would decorate anything you worked with. So you couldn't work for those 12 days of Christmas, which started on Christmas Eve and ran to January. So the 12th night, all that was spinning. You know, what was the biggest thing you used at home? Of course, it's the spinning wheel. It's not your dishwasher. I suppose today you could decorate your dishwasher so you would use it for 10 days. Dragging in a U-log. Your husband could decorate the wheelbarrow so he doesn't have to use it. But there was a reason why you decorated it. I thought that part is interesting. But here in New England, you know, a little bit of each of those traditions came. You still had Puritans come here. I think we've all heard the stories of, there really wasn't, you know, there weren't Christmas trees and, you know, in Plymouth, you know, around Plymouth Rock for 14 years or whatever. But as more and more people came in, we did start bringing in more decor. If you look in the windows, this is the earliest image I could find. In those leaded windows, you'll see sprigs of green, of probably spruce, hanging in the window. And colonists generally would bring in greens from the outdoors during the winter period as their first way of decorating, and then drink, because that was the other part you did at Christmas. So Christmas in the country here, which is, I think the date is what, 1798, but still about cider and beer and some decorating. But you see these same sort of images of every pane, and you would put a piece of green in every pane of the glass. So you find this in old artwork. And it's when you could eat sort of luxurious. It's like, I love this quote. This is from 1772, this month. Much meat will be roasted in the rich men's kitchens, the cooks sweating, making mince pies and other Christmas cheer, with rivers of punch to everywhere. Of course, that's all the alcohol. But all this came from England. And games. So the adults play games because the children still would all be put to bed. Christmas was not a children's holiday until maybe the mid-19th century. So they would go to bed because it was all about the partying and the exciting games. But today, when we look back at sort of colonial era, when we decorate our homes, we look at this. Like, what's this? This is colonial Williamsburg, right? Which fits so well with our homes. But do you know the history? Does anyone who know the history of the colonial Williamsburg look? You know, because it was fascinating to me. I did not realize that. So the whole look really is new. This is not period. No one in Virginia would take 100 lemons or a pineapple, which would be so precious because you grew it for 2 years in your greenhouse and then put it over your door in the winter. It was all invented by a woman in 1926 in House Beautiful magazine who decorated, I believe the story is right, she decorated colonial Williamsburg using materials she felt they would have had to use. So fresh fruit, lemons, though partially true because they would have had all those. Certainly sea captains were bringing in pineapples and citrus fruit, right, from Morocco and from Spain. And certainly it looks and it fits. But all of these would be considered too, unless you're super wealthy, you wouldn't waste all that, something that took months to come over on a ship. But that pineapple image is used everywhere in Maryland, in a lot of early colonial cities, as sort of the Georgian pineapple is a classic symbol. But it was so precious, you know, they had these glass stands that were made for pineapples. You had special plates and servingware for pineapples. Or it's pine apples, right? It was 2 words. Old greenhouses always talked about, it's outside of Boston, they would have pineapple houses where they grew just pineapples. They would have nectarine houses. This is mid 1700s. So this fruit, yeah, you may have done a table like this, but most likely you did not decorate the outdoors. Here's pineapples growing in a pit house outside of Boston. But in fact, the oldest greenhouse, Rosemary is certainly a great. This is the oldest greenhouse in North America is outside of Boston, this pit house, which does look remarkably like this drawing of a pineapple house in Virginia. But again, you're not going to decorate with these things, but you were going to use them. I mean, and they were being grown here. So the ideas of sun pits, early greenhouses like this that are really dug into the ground so the radiant heat could come out, where we had some of our earliest winter vegetables. You know, we weren't eating candy. Canning wasn't even invented yet, right? Not until the 1900s. So you weren't canning with glass jars. You were either pickling and preserving in fat, you know, duck confit or something, or you had cabbages and potatoes in a root cellar. but you didn't have fresh vegetables. But around the mid-1800s, you could start getting fresh lettuce, even asparagus was being forced with steam. But you always had herbs that you could pick. So there were herbs, there were cold weather herbs. You could do the Logies, you could do the pit house. There's sort of a classic New England pit house where there's always that scent of lavender and rosemary and those medicinal Mediterranean herbs that you could create wreaths with. Not that they were making topiary trees back then, but that look is somewhat authentic. But still, even up until 1805, you were placing sprigs of holly in everything. No. You see, that was being recreated at a colonial home. So he had told the story earlier to introduce me that I used to go to the Horticultural Hall and exhibit. I got caught up in the exhibiting as you're doing in there. So it's like 10 or 12-year-old me would say, I'm going to enter the holiday show, and there would be a wreath category. And one of the categories was the Della Robbia wreath, and I had no idea what that was. But I saw that they were wiring in lemons and fruit. And that's it, and it was beautiful. So for maybe throughout high school, I made Della Robbia wreaths and I would sell them. But not understanding the reason or the research and why they even call it Della Robbia. And really, it's a 15th century, and I'm sure many of you know this, but it's a 15th century ceramic style of taking fruit and creating artificial fruit and creating wreaths that were used as architectural design elements. And later on as plates and such. And still, it's a wonderful inspiration and influence for anyone wanting to create an unusual garland. I know we did a wedding in Newport where we created just artichokes and bay laurel leaves and oak leaves with acorns because it mimicked the phrase that was inside the panels of the room already. But you can go to the Met and you can see a lot of Italian early 16th century Della Robbia ceramic work or terracotta work. And it's clearly where the designs came from for colonial Williamsburg. And certainly it's relevant today, keeping things all using pomegranates, using fruit from biblical fruits, if you will, or fruits that are combined with pine cones, which I don't think Della Robbia may have done. But when you see one created with fresh fruit and fresh plant material, it's fantastic. And easy to do. I mean, it's just you don't want them to freeze outside, but we would do this when we create fruit garlands on homes and we put them up the night before an event. Does anyone remember these? It's so funny because I made these for church bazaars as a kid, and when I first job at a florist, we would sell dozens and dozens of berry bowls. And this is an ad from Horticulture Magazine, an old Horticulture Magazine. There's always and there were classes for this at Horticultural Hall to exhibit berry bowls. And, there'd be 15 berry bowls in from the different garden clubs. But this goes back to the 1700s in New England, some old craft. I mean, it is totally frowned upon now because you're using native endangered plants. Or they're not all endangered, but they were primarily partridge berries and checkerberries or the wintergreen berries that you find growing right now, or maybe down here, maybe a month from now. If you walk out the day after Thanksgiving into the woodlands, you'll suddenly notice like, wow, the moss looks so green and the lichens on the logs look so beautiful, and you start picking these up. If you've ever been hiking, it's really tempting. Basically, if you were, a woman in 1750, you'd take these back and place them in a jar and keep them in your home because you're creating a little terrarium each summer. And that was a craft that really went through probably till 1970 or so. These stopped, and I know it stopped because I looked on Google berry bowls to show someone the other day, and only my blog pictures come up. So it truly is a lost art, but for a good reason it's lost. But there were standard plants, and I know just like in your flower arrangements out there, you had to put a list of plants. You had to have, a good year in these bowls, or you would be disqualified. You would have to have Belvedere procumbens, or you'd be disqualified. You'd have to have the chinchilla or the pipsua, the white leaf in the lower left. You'd have to have one of those in there. And I made these with my dad. And I had fond memories of berry bowls. Sometimes you make big ones, small ones, give them as gifts. Church bazaars would have them. but they're totally gone, and I think I'm okay with that. So I decided to create the imitation garden ball. So this is just created from plants from Home Depot. And then I stuck Ilex verticillata or winterberry ranches. You still pick them off, still have some cones. So that's a tropical fern. The tropical plants, but it looks probably even better than the real berry bowl. So I think you can still make one in a beautiful container, and they last all winter long. It's a terrarium. You know, this is princess pine probably, right? This was something in New England you still might find made into a garland. It's a lycopodium. I mean, it's certainly not encouraging any you to pick it, but 30 years ago and further, this was really common. My dad would insist we make these thick ropes the day after Thanksgiving. We would pick these in burlap bags, laid out on the floor in the kitchen, and make these thick, beautiful garlands of lycopodium. Now I think of it, and I'm horrified that we picked that name. But it was something that was done probably for 100 years in New England before anyone knew it better. And you still might see it sold somewhere. I think a lot of, I don't have to bring them from Appalachia or what, but you will still find some at some forests. I saw a wreath of it last year. But those are what people were picking in New England for holiday grains. Even preserving, you could preserve that in glycerin and it would stay green until summer. Of course, Mount Laurel here, you see this is still traditionally used, but do know that it's not encouraged. It's not a red listed plant, but it takes a long time to regenerate. I think for the same look of Mount Laurel, I mean, I have a greenhouse, so I have big bay laurel trees, so I cut those back. And this is when I prune them, and then I make a bay laurel leaf, which actually is nicer. Like that. So here's a German etching, and this, I believe, is from early 1700s of showing people would go looking for greens in the woods. This was what you did before the winter holidays. Trying to expand my palette for greens. These are just ones I picked around the yard or garden or from the greenhouse because there's some olive and bay laurel in there. But it's bay, it's laurel, it's rosemary. Doesn't get more Christmassy than that. I had an olive tree out on the terrace. It just got too big, so we hacked it back and made an olive wreath. This lasted all winter. And also with a greenhouse, you start to learn, this is the most amazing thing about having a cold greenhouse in New England. You start to learn this 5th gardening season. You know, the camellias, the olives and bay, of course, and all the bulbs, they all bloom the same time every year. So starting now, while the South African bulbs are blooming, and then it continues through January and February, so all winter long. You did many Christmas dinners and New Year's dinners. I just have all camellias on the table. If you buy a book from the early 1800s, a gardening book, you'll see they were using the same plant material. And that's something we really have lost. You see the garland. I love looking at garland use. This is actually an Edwardian England shot of garland. There's vintage Christmas cards in the window. It's the first time kids are really seeing imagery in color. But again, back to the Christmas cards, if you start even collecting these to frame, ferns were a big thing at Christmas. So this leads back into the berry bowls again. You know, anything that was green was precious. So from the mid 1700s on, the idea of a fernery or collecting ferns, and ferns used through the winter months. So it's a New Year's greeting card. So just the importance placed in something as simple as a fern. And Pterodomania was, the idea of collecting ferns and keeping them in bell jars and glass jars. And these weren't tropical, these were ferns from our woodlands. Still beautiful though. You can press ferns, you can think of a collection of, fern plants that you buy at a florist or a good nursery and putting them in nice, bagwell containers and displaying them. That along with, brown ribbons could be very holiday-like and winter-like. Growing ferns was a really popular pastime, especially for women in 1800s. So the idea of early domes or Edwardian cases. The plant windows. And in the back of many of these old books, you'll see ads for all these little horticultural glass boxes to keep ferns and cellars of ferns. I don't think we've ever been so passionate again about ferns. But maybe that's coming around. Now, the idea of holiday flowers really good. A lot of this goes with sort of wealthy outside of the big East Coast cities, because they could grow all these South African or Southern Hemisphere bulbs and plants, right? So you had, these are all South African bulbs. I now grow in the greenhouse, and when I look at these, I think January, February, because Sparaxis is blooming. Or some of the, calla lilies are blooming. And I think, I figured this out on my own. I'm not sure, I have no data behind it, but when I look at the membership of, let's say, the horticultural societies in Philadelphia, New York, and Boston, the majority of their members were ship captains, right? So where were they? Why in the back of these catalogs, or the back of the books, you're seeing lists of 300 color varieties of freesias, or one of them has 45 hyacinth cultivars. They weren't being grown in the US. So they were coming, if you look at us, they're coming from South America, they're coming from South Africa, they're coming from the West Indies. So they're either wild, they most likely were wild collecting these bulbs. And again, like I said before, I'm sure the slave trade moved in this, but they were moving sugar, they were moving spices. But the same captains, but basically they're going London, Boston, South America, and the tip of Africa. And they all had greenhouses, so I think they're the ones who could afford to have a big state greenhouse outside of Boston or New York. So only a theory, but I think that's the only way I can think of they were getting so many dried plant material, because they could be shipped on a ship off season, they weren't freezing, like paper whites. And that they could be growing in their greenhouses or their homes. I mean, I don't think average people were growing these things. But if you look at something like paper whites, or let's say the Chinese sacred lilies, is sort of fall blooming, winter blooming narcissus. There were many cultivars available 200 years ago. So it's not a new thing. In fact, it's such a not new thing that 1,000 years ago, the Chinese were still growing them. And of course, this Chinese sacred lily is still very, besides so many other forest bulb plants throughout much of Asia. But this is all, pre-1900s catalogs that are offering easy to force bulbs in homes that didn't have heat yet. Beautiful polyanthus, and also other things like anemones and ranunculus and freesias. None of these grew in the United States. These are all coming on ships. But they're known. I mean, if you think you could read an old Thalassa Crusoe book, and she would talk about her childhood, your mother would always have white anemones on the table for Christmas. There were no poinsettias. There was no. Not even holly was considered cool at that in the early 20th century, but it was those greenhouse flowers, because flowers are so special. And there are lots and lots of engravings in any old seed catalog and bulb catalog you find. Here's some narcissus in China. And today we still grow these. I mean, I think there was a gap, maybe 50 years, where people weren't growing paper whites until maybe again in the 1990s. But there are other narcissus that bloom as easily as paper whites, which I never see anyone growing. They might be harder to find, but Narcissus ramoxii, these start blooming in about a month. Super fragrant, they're small. This is the first year I've seen them for sale in Dutch catalogs. Before that, I had to pay $35 a bulb from Northern Europe. Narcissus serotinus, and this is funny because this is like a $45 bulb. The flower is as big as my thumbnail, but it blooms in October, each November. But it does grow wild throughout Crete, through southern Spain and Portugal. But you can buy these. And I'm so thrilled the way it smells, and it's so small and miniature. I want to fill a pot full of them. It seems expensive, but you save the seed pod, put the seed back in the pot, and all the seedlings grow in a year and a half. But these aren't in the trade, but there are a lot of things out there, there's still opportunities. There's a beautiful green narcissus that blooms in the fall. Narcissus viridiflora. They say it's fragrant. I think it smells like a Sharpie. You almost don't see it, but it's so unique, and they're using a lot of this now in readers on Instagram. You'll see it. Taking these or saving the pollen, and then using it in the spring to get green color into the narcissus. Again, Narcissus remarxii. You'll see this sold as Julia Jane sometimes in catalogs. But it can be forced without chilling. So as I'm showing you these. Same thing with Bacchanalia, the Cape Primrose, the Cape Hyacinth. You'll see those, so all just as easy as paper whites. Now the Lenten rose, the Christmas rose, hellebores, all of these. As a researcher, I've always seen these. I hope to have them, and only recently now we're seeing them come to the market. But in England and Germany, these were totally known as Christmas plants. They didn't thought they painted them in bowls. You can get German, Russian Christmas cards. This is the first thing that blew in the snow. This is in my greenhouse. And now you will find these at Wegmans, you know, which is, you're like, I'm gonna pay $25, but you can plant it in the ground and it will bloom the following year. So it's a great, really authentic Christmas plant or winter celebration plant. And I don't think it gets more authentic than that. So was Lily of the Valley. Now, Lily Valley you would find at Christmas. I don't know if you remember the old horticulture magazines. You would see like a white flower farm ad for pips for forcing Lily of the Valley. And you don't see that anymore, although they still carry them if you call them. They were refrigerated. It's a huge market. They would refrigerate pips, the dug roots of Lily of the Valley for a whole year, so they can force them for weddings throughout the year. Remember, there was no air travel. Flowers weren't coming here from the Netherlands. Everything was local. And the Lily of the Valley was very, very common winter flowering plant. Now you can force these yourselves. I've done it many times. I dig them right now. Wash the pips off. I plant them in potting soil. Keep them somewhere cool, like you would your forcing bulbs. Although they could freeze a little. And then wait 10 weeks, bring them into the house to force. The trick is with Lily Valley is to keep them really warm under lights, like 72 degrees. Otherwise they grow very slow. But in 2 weeks they'll be in bloom. But you can see they were used just for every winter holiday. It was Valentine's Day, New Year's. And sold in pots. It was violets and scented French violets and Lily Valley that were sort of the iconic winter blooming flowers. These on the left, they're French grown, but they came from White Flower Farm. The pips, those will bloom sooner. There's some in the pot in the greenhouse. Sometimes I have so many. These I dug in the garden. I just put them in wooden flats under a bench and then brought them to the house under artificial lights. Because I think this is something this will be my next book. It's nothing like the smell of Lily of the Valley. You don't really appreciate it in May. Scented violets completely lost, yet we are living in the one part of the world where these were the most common, from Connecticut through the Hudson River Valley to the world's largest producer of scented violets. These are not the blue violets you see growing in the garden. This is it. This is the French varieties of Viola odorata. Almost all lost, but a few can be found. You know it when you smell it. But they like a cool sun porch, a mudroom. They bloom from January through March. And again, you'll see these three greeting cards combined with, there's Christmas moon. It was the Valentine's Day flower. Thousands of bunches were put on the trains and sent to New York. And of course, camellia is a classic. Hard to grow indoors, but if you have an unheated room or a garage, these will do fine. They can go dip into freezing temperatures. I have friends with glassed-in porches that freeze down to 26, and they do just fine. Long-lived, plants are 150, 200 years old in a lot of old greenhouses. That's in my greenhouse. You have some new varieties on the left. This picture here is in our unheated studio attached to the house. They bloom all winter. If it goes above 60, forget it, they're gonna drop their buds. But really, they are the winter flower. I think every day I could go out and pick a bowl of camellias and bring them in. And you can see why in the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, this was very special. That's what's that. I should have to show that because I don't know what it means. And then sometimes this is just a few things to tie up with at the end. This is a really rare blue crocus from Brazil that's extinct in the wild, but it's on old Christmas card, which I thought really does prove that sea captains are bringing in rare bulbs. Fancy's always did well in the cool greenhouse. You think the Isabella Stewart Garden Museum, you know that nasturtiums are great winter greenhouse plants, so that was used as a Christmas flower. These are ones being grown for Isabella Stewart Garden Museum and North Shore greenhouses. And of course, amaryllis, which I was surprised to know that we, in the 1700s, we had amaryllis here in North America. They're still being brought in on ships. I mean, they're native to South America, but the best ones are grown in South Africa and the Netherlands today. But if you want them to bloom for Christmas, you have to make sure they're South African ones. Otherwise, they're going to bloom in February, March. So if it says Christmas blooming, that's not just a scan, it's just like that. They simplified it for you if you're buying amaryllis. If it says Christmas blooming on it, then it's one from South Africa. Skip over from the short on time here. But these you can see 1894, some beautiful amaryllis. I mean, today some of the best do come from White Flower Farm, I have to say, because they have their own growers. And you'll get 3 bulbs, sometimes 4 from a bulb. So you may go, I'm not paying $35 for a bulb, but you're getting 4 stems out of it. That the last stem comes out in March. It's like buying 4 bulbs. But there's no bad amaryllis, right? These are all in our living room. The Christmas ones are grown earlier, so they're grown in the southern hemisphere, so they come into bloom. If you find them potted, that's better because an amaryllis wants to have roots. They always have roots. The roots never die in amaryllis or anything in the amaryllis family for that matter. So the same thing with snowdrop, which is why you want to plant them in the green, right? Or in a rainy. If you do hack the roots off and dry them out, they're not going to bloom for the fall. So you may see these, which do bloom, they do work, but the roots have been cut off. And most of the commercial ones you find have roots cut off, which won't affect this year's blooming. But if you want to rebloom it, don't give up. Wait 2 years, 3 years. The way amaryllis grows, any amaryllis does, they go dry and dormant for half the year, and that's when the roots grow. So in a hot, dry greenhouse, the roots in my amaryllis pots, that's when they're like, we gotta grow. They're looking for water, and they get, it sticks to your finger and they go through the holes of the pots. And then in the fall, they stop growing, they're just gonna take some water. But that's what keeps the bulbs alive. They form their bulbs 3 to 5 years in advance in that bulb. So same thing with an agapanthus, which is an amaryllis. If you cut it open, you'll see smaller and smaller buds going through the future years. So if you have an agapanthus that doesn't bloom next year, it's because you didn't fertilize it well enough the previous summer and give enough water and give it a rest. So it's just that sort of care in the early years. So we talk about old-fashioned flowers. I just went from Buddleia asiatica. This is a really common. Lochies was built on this plant. This is what they built lochies for in the 1800s to grow for winter weddings and for Christmas. That's a fragrant Buddleia that grows in the winter. But I think the most iconic Christmas flower is the poinsettia, right? I mean, it has great connections to Bartram, who brought it here from Onset. This goes, 1837, so it's very early. Grown in England, it quickly blooms. Naturally, it blooms in January, February. So they learned through controlling the photo period. It's a huge family euphorbia. We know there's lots of species. But the first big greenhouse ranges were built for poinsettias. These are boosts in, was it 1846 outside of Philadelphia? Huge glass house ranges. This is when glass was just kind of invented, right after the Crystal Palace. And a huge business of selling, he had a huge business of selling seeds and plants. But really saw value in what he thought was the poinsettia. But who changed it for us was Paul Eck. So the Eck family still grows the best poinsettias in the world in California. But this I didn't know, they were originally grown as cut flowers, not as a public plant. In fact, they were grown as a cut flower up into the 1940s, until World War II. This is like a pick your own field outside of Hollywood, 50 cents a bunch. They'd be cut and shipped on trains back east. You find old postcards showing the Eck fields. They had trips you can take in on trolley cars. And then they started breeding patented varieties. And they aren't poisonous to cats, so we'll get that out of the way too. They're just toxic. So Kids might get a little nauseous or sick, but they're not deadly. But using artwork, so early paintings, you're starting to see poinsettias. And maybe today we'll start seeing them again as cut flowers, because some florists are working with it, but that was, the fields would be cut and they'd be sent to New York City and promoted that way as a beautiful long stem cut flower. And you'll see these in old movies. So Back to Christmas in Connecticut, if you look on the table at the left, you know, you'll see vases of poinsettias. You'll never see pots of poinsettias. Or, you know, I forgot this holiday movie, but with Debbie Reynolds. You know, they're bringing in cut bouquets of poinsettias. So I always try to capture when they see them in old films. And today there's, you know, fabulous cultivars. Some a little too fabulous. And I personally like big poinsettias, which you don't see anymore. There's Paul Eck with, you know, a standard, which you might find a standard, but, you know, I remember seeing 5-6 foot plants, and I love those. You see them at, you know, in displays and greenhouses. And I went to college in Hawaii where, you know, they're 12 feet high around all the homes. But today they're all sprayed with bonsai or plant growth regulators, up to 16 treatments, right, to keep them short. But I'm fear that our kids think that's what they're supposed to look like. And I'm sure there's 30-year-old designers at Michael's designing short, stumpy, plant growth regulated silk ones. Because that's all with a beautiful foil on it, as if that's what it's supposed to look like. So I think we need to pull back a little bit, get a nice clay pot, a nice tall poinsettia, a nice tall Easter lily. Christmas cactus is always that one thing, you've heard all the rumors on how to get in the bloom, right? So these are jungle cactus, right? They grow on trees in jungles in Brazil, but not cacti. And there's a number of different species I won't go into, although it's in my flower book.
Matt, we might need to.
Yeah, I have it. I'm 10 minutes over. I will cut it short. I'll get to oranges. I hate the stuff, you can tell. But, so right, this is a good year. This is the first year all my Christmas cactus are in bud right now. Some of yours are, but really the trick is they're gonna respond to daylight, right? They want long nights. And I know people say put them in the cellar and all that, but the trick is just give them natural daylight and nighttime temperature, nighttime light without light, dark room, and then they should bud for you. I close with oranges because I think this is so un-Christmassy and so holidays, but fascinating. And always searching for this. So you always heard parents used to say, "I'll get coal and an orange," and I was talking at Christmas. And they're like, "Yeah, right. Why?" Well, the Asian community was coming here early, right? They're coming here to work on the railroads, and the Japanese, especially in Western Canada, you know, big communities outside of Vancouver and Seattle. Well, they were bringing in what's sacred to them were oranges. Oranges was winter crop. They weren't being grown yet in California. They weren't being grown yet in Florida. And you can go back to the early 1800s and see announcements in East Coast papers of the orange train coming. The orange train would come usually like a week at Christmas because they would come in on ships into the port of Seattle. All these are Mandarin oranges, right? So all the mandarins would come there and they'd be shipped to the East Coast and sold, and they became associated with Christmas. It's hard to, I had found old etchings originally. Today I can find most of the people who romance about this now are people who are model trained, who still recreate the orange train. But there were a number of orange trains and they were painted orange. And eventually when California started growing in like the 1880s and to the gold rush, they were painting the fruit express trains orange. So oranges was such a big and exotic thing. And the same thing was happening in Europe from Morocco. So they're bringing up ships of oranges. And today we know them as halos, mandarins, right? Or cuties or whatever, but just know that a mandarin orange, and there are lots of mandarin oranges, 20 cultivars or so, they all have reticulated skins that come off. They're easy to peel. And there are many types, but they're the earliest oranges, always around Christmas time. A good antique shows you will find, these aren't antique ones, but the green wax paper that was traditionally used for 150 years was always saved, and they would make Christmas ornaments out of them. And I'm just starting to see now some crafts on Etsy of people saving them again, because you're getting like these expensive sumos in, which are like a really premium mandarin, but that's important. The leaves are important on it, They have to have leaves and they have to have the green wax paper. I found sites that sell just stacks of the vintage green wax paper. So I feel like it's just something really authentic. Oh yeah, there's a Hallmark film on it. But you can see these old engravings like Union Pacific Railroad, Christmas Day of Santa with the oranges. Man, lanterns would be given out for markets to hang when the mandarins would come. And earlier you saw that. So these are just a selection of mandarin oranges. They know most of these. Easy to peel, this reticulated white netting that's between the skin and they're sweet and they're delicious. And I said historically they've been through Europe right up until medieval times. They were considered very precious. Coming on the ship. It's terrible when they get stuck in the mountains. This is the Grandee leader. This is in Quebec where the Japanese oranges are coming in. So it's kind of fun to think of that. And then looking back further, of course, we see these. These go really back to medieval times. We would have a studded orange or pomander ball, basically to keep body odor down, but also this is Christmas decorations. So that's it. I'll just close some quick pictures where I kind of put all this together in my home. These are easy to force bulbs. Black Magnolia, you don't have to chill them. This is as easy as paper whites. This is a teal colored one. There are clematis that bloom in the winter on windowsills. Incense cedar really gives an old-fashioned look. And then I always say, promote camellias, try growing camellias.
Matt, thank you so much. Your passion and your knowledge is incredible. I wish we could stay longer. And of course, your photography. So thank you. If anybody wants at least one of his books, Matt did bring some here. Otherwise, as you were mentioning, your award-winning blog, Growing Plants, is a way to follow Matt and learn more. But thank you. We have a good meeting.
Thank you. Special thanks to Matt, and we know there's going to be a run on Etsy in a little while. For mistletoe and paper. So big thank you again. Amy, do you have a little shout out in the back?
I do have a shout out. It was such a nice surprise today for me to show up and to see Cindy Willis, one of your friends in Southampton, who is in the Southampton Garden Club, to be a judge for the place setting competition. Cindy was instrumental in organizing the tour out there. She works with Alison Fulmer, and it was just an amazing experience. And she put together an incredible list of gardens and also an historic church. So just wanted you guys to give a shout out.
Thank you.
You're
welcome. And we also today's second year provisional. Over here we have Sue Hayes. Big thank you to Sue for assisting with that. All right. And we also like, Mary, could you give us a little heads up on who is here today joining
Okay,
us?
so we had 4 guests. We had Ingrid, who's over there, I guess I can stand. Liza Smith, Eileen Rose, and
We were so thrilled. This weather today is unbelievable. And we wanted to thank our tea table for today was done by a group of horticulture and conservation members, brilliantly led by Cindy Stamp. So thank you. I mean, if you haven't seen housekeeping before our quick committee reports, mark your calendars. It was in the November 1st newsletter, but the Greenwich Dahlia show, Dahlia, I've got dahlias on the brain now. Okay, the Greenwich Daffodil Society show is on April 20th of 2022. And our club does have the Bread and Becky's fundraiser option. And if you go on Bread and Becky's, you can get some bulbs. They do have some bulbs still available, daffodil bulbs on their website, so you can get them for this competition. The competition is both photography and floral design. They'll have an availability for entries in both of them.
And more.
And more. Yes, yes. So please, we thank you all for participating in that, but go on the Bread and Becky's and are grateful. Another calendar note this week, we just got a heads up yesterday. We should all be receiving the invitation and registration for the GCA Floral Design Conference on December 8th. So you'll be getting your invitation, so please register for that. And then, if I printed mine out this morning, it will be coming your way soon, but you'll be receiving our second Folly Farm Journal, which is absolutely unbelievable. Big thank you to Gigi Garnett for helping with all this. Our newsletter from across the pond, the photos are stunning, and the descriptions of the activities and everything they're doing is just, it's mind-boggling and just amazing. So that will be coming to you shortly. And I think that's it. Trace?
2 more quick notes, and we'll get to committees. Our library decorating team and our greens workshop committee are doing courses this December. Unfortunately, Catholic Charities cannot accept our smaller age that's usually what they put on their committees again for the second year. We will be making a donation to them as we did last year, just to continue our relationship. But in the meantime, the rest of the designated funds will be combined to refresh and revamp the Darien Library. Very tired looking holiday decorations. And we appreciate these 2 committees working together and pivoting as we continue to navigate the ever-changing schedule. And finally, please make sure to check out the Zone 2, the GCA Zone 2 landing page. The lead photograph is, hopefully you all saw the November newsletter. It has Judy and Nancy and Lois' story of bringing them their acorns for the Gavel Challenge. And our zone rep was so pleased that it's being sent other places too. So we are very pleased and we thank all of them for participating. Now we can go to committee reports. And first up, we got Patty Bonyana with her turn.
So, thanks everybody.
Hey Patty, do you mind coming up here just so the Zoomers can see you?
Sure.
Thank you. Or hear you.
So I just want to say thank you to everybody who came to our cleanup that we had a few weeks ago, and now we need to plan our post first frost cleanup, which we've planned for a week from this coming Friday on November 19th. We're hoping if it does get cold, it'll be a little warmed up by 11 a.m. So that's our plan. Whether or not we will have frost by then, we're not sure. But anyway, so anybody interested in coming to help, then certainly our community members, we can see them. We'll send out an email. Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. And next up we have hear more about the J. McLaughlin fundraiser. We have Holly, Sandy, and Lisa. And we'd like to point out we are both wearing J. McLaughlin.
They are both wearing J. McLaughlin, as are Lisa and Sandy, who already came in our dress, we're all dressed, head to toe J. McLaughlin. We are very, we're really excited about our sip and shop, which is going to be next Thursday, November 18th. A sip and shop just means come have a sip of something fun, maybe some wine, appetizers, and shop. Shopping is the important part. 15% of all of the sales is going to come right back to Barton Public Darien. Last year, we raised $3,000, which is amazing for one afternoon of fun. We do all the work at the store. All you have to do is come and shop. Last year, we had 30 shoppers total whose donations went back to Barton Club. 20 of them shopped that day, but 10 of them shopped that whole week before. So if you can't make it on Thursday, if you're traveling, you can call the store with your order,
or you can pop in before and just say, I want this to go to Garden Club. It's a great way for us to make money. We have so many great causes that we want to give to. This is a really easy way for us to raise money. Bring your friends. They don't have to be part of Garden Club. Any of our sales that day will come back to us. So bring a friend. It's a really great way to do it. We have some special surprises in store that Lisa wants to tell you about. Oh, that's me. I'll tell you about the special surprises.
Last year, we gave away, Jay McLaughlin gave away a natural bug spray for everybody. This year, Jay McLaughlin is teaming up with Nielsen's, who is going to, they're gonna set up a stem bar. And what that means, if you made a purchase, you can pick out 6 stems from the stem bar, so you can bring home a little bouquet. But also I want to talk about bring friends. It's an easy way for the Garden Club to make money, but so either come and then go out for lunch afterwards nearby, or come and have a sip of wine and go out for dinner with your friends. But it's these comments, 2% goes to the Garden Club.
And if that's not enough, I didn't know that. We'll also sponsor a raffle. Everyone who shops will also receive a raffle ticket, and at the end of the sip and shop, we'll pick a winner. The winner may choose any handbag or tote in the store. How fun will that be? They have all new wonderful products for the holidays. Pick out a new party outfit or some gifts for the men in your life. Get a jump on your holiday shopping and complimentary gift wrapping and shipping. Save an expensive trip to the post office and let them ship anywhere in the US for free. Bring your addresses and they will take care of it.
Right, we're really. When is this again? Thursday, November 18th, next Thursday. But you can shop now. Call the store or stop by.
Just mention Garden Club.
Just mention Garden Public Area and we'll save your receipt. Nothing after the 18th. We turn our number into corporate that night. So if you come the next day, it's too late, but anything up to then will count. So we look forward to seeing everybody.
Thanks so much.
I did a great outfit for your tailgate.
Selling Leslie Sampson, provisionals. Next.
I'm gonna go up here.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Provisionals, busy. We had a fantastic week last week. We were at Diane's house and we had a floral conditioning workshop. It was an absolute treat, let me tell you. She got flowers from East Coast and from Trader Joe's. And so we conditioned the flowers. We made arrangements, which we distributed about town. They went to the library, they went to the senior centre, they went to the police, who were thrilled. They went to the forest station and they went to Post 52 amongst others. So we also enjoyed a lovely catered box lunch. And Diane had also done a video of a trip to East Coast because we can't go as a group at the moment. So we still had a video tour around the East Coast. So that was a real joy. All enjoyed at Diane's house. So that was Wednesday. Friday, we were at Lewis's, where we participated in the horse bulb planting workshop. Again, we had a great afternoon, and so all the provisionals have planted hyacinths and tete-a-tete, and some of them also have that with us. And then yesterday, we were up at the Mather Barn, and we were putting the plantings to bed. They're all fine, but the main thing we were doing was dismantling the rain barrel, which has been a big success in the summer. So we have detached it from the downspout and turned it upside down, and it's going to remain there for the winter, and we'll get it reattached in the spring. So as I say, busy. Everybody is doing really well. So well done to them. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to go back to the T10 arrangement because first of all, I need to give a big thanks to Cindy Stan, who I think is actually left, but she did an amazing job, as you can see. A group of us from Hort and Conservation got together. We foraged in the woods, we brought things in from the woods, we brought things from our gardens, and we had a big pile of stuff on my kitchen table. And I knew that I didn't have the talent to lead a workshop to say how to design it. So Cindy led the workshop,
She took most of our materials. The hornet's nest is from my own front yard. Some of the bird's nest. The mushrooms, we foraged, nothing endangered, nothing threatened. And I like to think of it as net zero in 2021. No goals, it is net zero, all locally sourced, nothing from China, no flower miles, nothing. And all biodegradable. So I hope it inspires you, because when I tried to describe it, I saw people who just were not interested in this project. And I thought, well, we have to actually have a product so that we can show people they can be inspired, because obviously the words I used didn't do it justice. I couldn't get a whole lot of interest. So I hope that this really does inspire you. And I think particularly from a conservation perspective, it's a very good teaching tool, and we're going to donate it to the Nature Center and hope the children don't probably take it. Destroy it, but anyway. So we're going to do that. So big thanks to Cindy, and also thanks to Lois Bayless, who ran our wonderful Force Bold workshop that Lissy just mentioned on Friday. It was really excellent. So thank you, Lois. And then finally, you already mentioned the Gavel Challenge. 33 of us are growing acorns that will hopefully become little oak saplings that we'll show at the Zone 2 flower show in Hartford next year. I mean, the real challenge, the real competition will be one in 100 years, but we won't be around to see it. Anyway, thank you all for participating, and I think we'll just choose a winner. It's one entry per club, so we'll choose a winner in around May. Thank you.
Thanks, Juliet. That's place in the room right now because I'm looking straight out of the table. It really is phenomenal. So very, very impressed. Next up, Betsy Bigler, photography. Yes.
I have a lot to say, guys, so sorry. I'm ready to echo the lunch. Let me kick this off. Hi. First of all, the note cards. Unfortunately, there was a glitch in receiving the envelopes, so we don't have our packages with us today. The envelopes everything's arriving this afternoon. We will package it up and we will deliver it to your homes. So we have plenty more to sell. There are a lot of people have signed up for them, but please go and sign up for some note cards. They're going to be really, really beautiful. Secondly, the GCA Focus on Photography 2021 contest finalists are up on the GCA Photography landing page. We don't know if any of our members are finalists in the contest, but you are welcome to go up on the GCA website on the photo landing page and vote for your favorite photograph. It's people's choice. Everybody from the country is going to participate, and the photographs are quite amazing. Thirdly, the Charter Oak GCA Zone 2 Meeting and Flower Show in June, which is why we're all growing our little acorns. There's also a photography classes, 4 classes, and every club is required to enter one photograph in each of the in one of the classes. We've signed up for class 3, which is titled Singular Sensation, a black and white photograph of a single tree in an urban or park-like setting. The registration deadline is April 15th to get the photograph in. So we're going to amend our photography schedule, and we're going to have a People's Choice exhibition in our February meeting, which is a Zoom meeting. So we'll put up a slideshow at the meeting, and you guys, there will be an option to vote on the chat button, I guess. Figure it out. But you can vote online at that meeting for the favorite photograph. So get out your cameras, look at our beautiful trees, and think about entering a photograph. And then finally, for the Christmas tea or tailgate, we have an exhibition of photographs titled Holidays in Reflection, an 8x10 color photograph displayed in black mat. Bring your photos to the tailgate, and we will have a spot to display them. And have fun with it. Be creative. Think about reflections. I mean, it could be an ornament or whatever, snow, but it should be really fun. And speaking of this, we have 13 extra black mats. There was sort of an issue, but Anyway, we do have 13 more black mats. If anybody would like a mat, please see Margaret Erics and pick one up. We got them here. So thanks a lot, guys. Have a great day.
I'll make it real quick.
Okay, scholarships for the GCA, the applications are being taken right now through the main umbrella for different activities. And they just also want to let you know, people are thankful if they're able to get a scholarship to pursue their horticulture or whatever. And please think of them as we come up to be thankful and giving time period, although the club does participate in that, but you can also on your own do that too. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Amy Chmieloki and Natalie Thomas for this quick conservation.
I am tall enough to see over this. Good morning. I have a question for you. What do you think that honeysuckles and Burmese pythons have in common? How about feral hogs and Kentucky bluegrass? Russian olives and lionfish? Well, when they're in the wrong place at the wrong time, they are classified as invasives. Invasive species are plants, animals, or fungus that are not native to a specific landscape and have a tendency to spread and cause damage to the ecosystem. Invasive plants compete with native plants for space, nutrients, water, and sunlight, and often outcompete the natives, resulting in reduced biodiversity and reduced forage for wildlife. Invasive plants are successful because they produce tons and tons of seed. They thrive on disturbed soil, like by roadsides or construction sites. They have aggressive root systems that can smother the roots of native plants. And some even produce chemicals on their leaves and on their roots that inhibit the growth of native species. So why should we care? Well, invasive species have contributed to the decline of 42% of the threatened and endangered species in the United States. They compete directly with native plants, biodiversity is decreased, they degrade wildlife habitat, water quality, and grassland quality too. So in our northern Great Plains, which is one of the last intact native grasslands in the world, native invasives and crop conversion have really endangered those ecosystems, and they're disappearing faster than rainforests, which get a lot more attention. So we have a little show and tell. Natalie?
Can everyone hear me if I don't talk in the mic? Excellent. All right, we're going to start with the number one most common and dangerous invasive in the country, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Unfortunately, because of the frost, it's called stilt grass. This might look like what there's several weeds this looks like. This has, but I would Google it because these seeds, once they get into your yard or the roadside, can last up to 5 years underground, and they can completely take over an area within 3 to 5 years. So this is your number one most damaging invasive, and it is all over the place. And I will leave it out and clean up after so you can come look at it. This is one of the most beautiful invasives. I've been eyeing it for years. This is called the Phragmite, and it's banned. But I've been driving to Tokenique for years, admiring it. It can get up to 18 feet tall. You can buy it on eBay, on Etsy. It's illegal and it's all over the place, and it is nearly impossible to get out. My favorite, and unfortunately, again, this is called Japanese barberry with frost. It was beautiful on Saturday, and you can't see it now. Look it up. We live in an area where this creates the perfect nursery for Lyme-carrying ticks. A tick will die if the humidity drops below 80%. When you have an invasion of the Japanese barberry, it creates 100% humidity. And wherever you have an infestation of this, which is, you walk through any of the Dairy and Land Trust areas, they actually have a USDA grant to get rid of this. Wherever you have Japanese barberry, you have
more line carrying tips. And I'm happy to talk about this forever, so if you want to talk about it after, this is all new to me.
So I don't know if any of you saw this in the New York Times this past weekend, but some chefs down south are getting really creative and starting to experiment with adding dishes made with invasive plants to their menus down there. As they say down south, if we fry it, they'll try it. And I'm not suggesting that the Garden Club of Darien get into that, but there's a garden group in Montana where I live that annually has an exhibition that's turned into a competition in floral design using invasives. So that's something that we might want to try in the springtime to showcase our talents, but also to educate each other about these pesky intruders in our backyards. Thank you.
Committee reports left of the website.
I'm gonna clean this up after, and I'll leave it back.
Morning, everybody. Two quick things. I wanted to follow up on the Folly Farm. If you missed your email with that attachment, it's on the website in the newsletter section. If you scroll down the bottom, we'll be keeping the copies there as well. And then the second and most important thing, it's come to our attention that people aren't getting all of the emails, the newsletters, the announcements, the Zoom links. Some people are, some people aren't. They come in late or not at all. So I've been doing a little bit of research on this and have been in touch with Constant Contact, the service that we use to send out all this stuff. And it's not them or us, it's your individual either email service or software update. So I've got a couple of articles that they've sent to me, which I'm going to send to everybody. And I'm telling you, in case you don't get it, just give me a call or email me directly and I will forward it to you. But you need to make Constant Contact like a safe sender. And then there's also some other helpful information to check your security systems on your computers. Because every time you do a software update or your computer update, your privacy and security settings will change, and our security is getting more robust because there are more threats out there, but it's impacting our email services. So, and if all else fails, I will forward a number for Constant Contact. You can contact them directly. They need to troubleshoot with you. So it's not something that we can do en masse. We just need to do it individually.
Oh, you have a question?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I guess Lisa and I talked, because I had this problem. If we just make, if it's the GCD newsletter we're not getting, if we just make it a contact on our contact list, will we then be able to?
That it should, that's one troubleshooting thing to do that may or may not work, because there are other settings sort of deep within your systems and your IP address.
I did try
could be
that, but I
affected.
couldn't get around to it.
Yeah, so I would I'll forward these articles, and they have some really good, because there's a difference between a filter and, a safe sender. So you just, and it could be a myriad of things, and that's what it's so hard to tell, because there's not one blanket answer to this. If the articles don't help, again, just call Constant Contact. They were great. You could actually get somebody on the phone and they were very helpful.
Thank you for doing all the research on this too. I am also one of these people affected.
Yes.
Up last will be Carolyn with results. Are any other committees available for comments, or we're all set? Okay, good. We're excited to have you up here.
A few things to cover, so just bear with me. Thank you so much to everyone who participated in our tabletops this week. We have some wonderful creative entries, and I encourage you to leave here and go straight into the dining room and admire them before they get taken down. We also want to thank the judges. They came from far away. One came from Worcester, so we have a Worcester contingent today, and the other one came from Long Island. I believe she was the host in the Hamptons. So thank you very much to Kathy, Mitchie, and Cindy Willis for making the trek to judge our competition. The judges' one commendation says the judges commend the Garden Club of Darien on the overall quality of the table settings, especially those entered in the provisional class. Great comeback, Kathy, Mitchie, and Cindy Willis. And now for the results. We had two classes. We have a member class and a provisional class. So in first place in the member class is Ally Callan, second place Lisa Webb, third place Mary Rooney, and honorable mention to Gretchen Ritchie and Lisa Von Stupen. So let's clap for them. Now provisionals, we do commend provisionals for taking the plunge and appreciate their entry. So first place goes to Kathy Armstrong, second place Kelly Stewart, third place Denise Kara, and honorable mention to Sue Higgins. And lastly, just a couple of floral design upcoming events. On November 18th at 10 a.m., we have Betsy's Zoom showing us the basics of botanical arts. And I encourage any of you who are interested to please send us an email at gcdfloral@gmail.com to sign up so that you can get the link. If you don't tell us you want the link, you won't get the link. So please let us know you're interested. It doesn't commit you to anything beyond that, but just to kind of learn about it. And again, that's November 18th at 10 a.m. So let us know at the latest by that Monday. And then we also have Emily's Thanksgiving centerpiece coming up Tuesday before Thanksgiving. For those participating. And lastly, there was a sign up going around for Emily's holiday outdoor pots. If you're interested in that, it's December 1st at 9:30. We're still taking a few more. We have a few more spots for that. If you're interested, please sign up on the way out on the membership table. And you know, she's estimating it'll be about $110 per pot. So just sign up if you're interested. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all so much, and thank you to everyone who signed up today for the tailgate on December 14th. We're looking forward to seeing everybody outside, bundled up and enjoying each other's company. So enjoy the beautiful day, and thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining.